Hey, I'm Chris from Make Everything, and today we're making a collapsible tiki bar. Check it out. Okay, so the concept behind this bar was an 8-foot wide, 24 inches deep, 36-inch high, basically table. And the purpose was for a beach event for a local charity. And the bar has to be collapsible, so I chose to make it out of 1x1 eighth wall steel tubing, and everything's going to be held together with 1/4-20 threaded hardware. So I cut everything to size with my little 18-volt porta band, and these cuts don't have to be really particularly square because everything's going to get squared up and filled, and this is a quick and dirty project. So I use this little square that I made in the wood shop, and it's basically just 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, and I cut them to a true 90 on the miter saw on the outside, and then I use the bandsaw to cut the 90 on the inside. And this works really well. Just by clamping these corners when I welded them, you'll see when I finish the square and I check it for squareness with diagonals, it's within 1/8 of an inch, which is more than good enough for this project. And I use those little aluminum blocks as spacers a lot when I'm welding because the welds won't stick to them, and I don't have to worry about, anything getting stuck on there, them getting tacked to the material, and they are a nice even 1, 2, 3 sizing. So again, I'm using these little corner squares and just getting everything squared up and welded on these sets of legs. And the top is going to be resting on top of these 2 legs, so their height is calculated in to be the proper height once everything's finished, which is 36 inches finished. And now I'm just cutting up some more material for the top, and this is going to be 24 inches deep, so this top is 22 inches wide, this crossbar that I just cut, and then plus the 1-inch tubing on either side will make it even 24. And this material had a little bit of a warp in it, so it was a little tougher for me to hold it down and get it welded because it was 8 feet long. But again, this is going to get a wood top on it, so it's pretty forgiving. I have 2 of these corner clamps, but I typically only wind up using 1 at a time. But they're totally super helpful and absolutely worth the 10 minutes it took me to make them. Just filling in all my welds. I do everything with a tack weld at first, and then I fill the welds once I am done tacking them, just so that nothing warps. And I'm just grinding the tops of those legs flat, and I'm grinding the bottom side of the tabletop flat so that everything sits nice. I like using these roller stands when I'm doing work like this because of the adjustable height. It's a little annoying to deal with the wheel, but the adjustability on the height makes it versatile for something like this, more so than a sawhorse. The next piece is a crossbar for in between the legs. And again, this is just the same 1x1 material, and I'm using some 1.5 by 1.5 angle stock to make some angle brackets that'll connect it to the legs. And these 2 will be connected with 1/4-20 fasteners, just like the rest of the whole table will be held together. And I'm using those aluminum blocks again and just a little spring clamp to get these nice and square, tack them up, flip it over, and finish weld both sides. And I'm drilling an oversized hole over here. Something like this is going to be assembled and taken apart by someone other than me. So I like to give the tolerances a little bit of room on a project like this so that whoever's assembling isn't fighting with it, trying to make sure it's perfect and trying to get the screws in there, because I know I'm not doing any fine calculating in terms of where my screws are going to wind up. I will label this crossbar with a front and top label, but I don't want it to be difficult for anyone else. So a key component to this project is a product called Weld-Nuts, and I buy mine at McMaster-Carr. You can see them over there. And what they are is a little steel nut, and they're not coated, and they give you almost a ½ inch of thread on something like thin wall tubing like this. You can very easily get a nice thread grab by drilling an oversized hole, putting in the weld nut, you tighten up your hardware, and then you weld the weld nut in on the flat side. And these can actually be welded completely flat so that it looks like they're not there at all. On this project, it's not totally important that I make them disappear, so I basically just tack them, give them a good bond, and then I grind them so that there's nothing really protruding, nothing sharp. When you're doing a project with 1/8 or 1/16 wall tubing, it can be hard to get good thread grab and thread engagement. And you can tap 1/8 inch tubing, but you're maybe going to get one thread if you're using 1/4-20 fasteners. So the weld nuts are a great solution for that. I use them all the time. McMaster sells them by the 100 or by packs of 50. I usually just buy them by the 100 because once you have a project that you'll use them on, you'll find 10 more projects that you'll use them for. So they make them in all different thread sizes. So again, I just oversize the holes, drill, put in my hardware, weld them in, grind it off. It's pretty easy process, and it'll make the assembly of this really nice and easy. I wanted this table to be able to flat pack. I built it for the charity and for a bar that always does the charity events, and I want them to be able to store it without feeling like they're burdened with it. And you can see it's pretty strong considering it's only eighth wall 1x1. And now I'm just flipping it over and finishing up, just grinding off any burrs that might be there, making sure that there's nothing sharp. And now I'm going to bring it into the wood room and start working on the top. So the side of the bar is wrapped in a bamboo, and it's a natural bamboo, like a screening material, and it's 8 feet wide by 6 feet tall, and it's held together by some aluminum wire that's centered on this roll and then offset on either side. It made it a little challenging to cut it in half because I needed these to wrap around the entire bar, which is 8 feet wide, 2 feet deep. Originally, I wanted to have the bamboo stick up over the top of the bar to act as sort of a barrier, but you'll see it doesn't really come out that great. So what I wind up doing is cutting the top down, making it so the bamboo is about 35 inches tall, and then adding a decorative cap on the end to just kind of give it a finished look. But to cut the bamboo, I just used my homemade track and my battery-powered circular saw. And the first pass didn't get all the way through it, so I had to go back and kind of freehand it. But the bamboo splinters pretty bad when you cut it. It sends these violent shards of stuff at your face, so it's a little annoying to deal with when you have to cut it with a power saw like that. And here I'm just adding some rubber cane feet, which I should have done earlier, but I was scratching up my floor and I wanted to get it done. So you can see how the bamboo is currently sticking up above the top. And this would be a problem for me because this venue where this bar is going to be displayed for the first time is on the beach. So right now the bamboo is sitting on my concrete floor, but once I would get it onto the sand, it would sag anywhere that there wasn't a fastener. And I really didn't have the time to go through and fasten every single piece of bamboo or even every other piece. Again, I'm using 1/4-20 fasteners for this. But in this case, I am tapping the 1/8 inch wall tubing because there's really no structure to these things. They're just being tacked in place. I didn't feel comfortable using zip screws because I wanted it to be a little more user-friendly and have it a little easier to sort of thread them in without a power drill. You could just use a screwdriver and put this whole thing together. So with the front on, I cut down the sides, and you just cut the aluminum wire that's in there and they come right apart. Wrapped it around the ends and clamped these on to get them lined up. You can see how the middle on that one sagged and sort of had the same problem on this side, so it definitely made sense to cut them down and do the decorative cap. So I'm just drilling and tapping, and what's nice about this thin wall tubing is that you can use a drill to tap. You don't have to worry about breaking taps or stripping out. And now it's on to working on the top. So for the top, I'm using a bandsawed pine, and I get this stuff from Home Depot. It's very cost effective, it's easy to work with, it stains up pretty well, and it gives sort of a rustic look. So I want this to kind of have, you know, a more reclaimed wood kind of feel. Originally we were going to use pallet wood, but it just wasn't available at the time when I needed to get this done, so the bandsawed pine will do. And in order to keep the top nice and rigid, I use some 2x4s on their side, and they'll be glued and nailed together to get the top to basically be strong enough to hold itself up and not have to worry about any sagging. There's going to be a jockey box, like a cooling keg box in the center of this bar, so I wanted to make sure it was strong enough without having to put in a fifth leg. So I clamped the 2x4s to the steel frame, I put some glue down, and then I just shoot it together with 2-inch 18-gauge brad nails. And I'm using a battery-powered nailer from Ryobi. A lot of people knock these things, but I'm telling you it's because you've never used one. They are awesome. I've been using that nailer for a few years now, and it's my go-to. You know, I have Shop Air, and I have all sorts of pneumatic nailers, but I still always go to the battery-powered nailer. And I don't have any endorsement with Ryobi, but I just like to tell people about a good tool that I enjoy using. So, a bunch of nails and glue, keep that together nice and tight. And then I just take this little Festool sander, and I'm not trying to get a perfect glass finish. I'm just trying to get this thing smooth to the touch, get all the high spots, and anywhere that might be rough, I want to eliminate that, because, you know, people are going to have their hands on this and it's going to be touched. But it's going to be mostly outside while it's being used, so I'm not going too crazy with the finish. And I'm sanding this with 120 grit paper, and I'm making sure I get the edge, and again, any sharp spots or any rough spots. And now the top is all one piece. I go by and just do a little bit of hand sanding and just sort of continue to clean it up. And for the finish on this, I'm going to use a Minwax Classic Walnut stain. And normally I would use like a pre-treatment when I was working with pine, but I've used this bandsawed pine a lot, and I kind of get the same results with the pre-treatment that I do without it. So I just apply this directly to it. And this is going to get beat up pretty quickly, so I'm not super worried about the high level of finish, but I just make sure I stain every area so that you don't see any light wood. There's one spot that didn't really take the stain, but other than that, it came out really nice. The classic walnut stain on this pine gives a nice kind of medium brown look, and a lot of times when you stain pine brown, it gets washed out and looks just dark, but this comes out nice. And here I'm working on that decorative cap I was talking about. This is actually the day of the event. I got to the shop and realized I really hated the way that bamboo looked, so I just banged these together. And these are 1x3. And this isn't really particularly finished material, but it's finished enough that it'll get us by. In a alternate reality, I would have used a 10-foot long piece for the front. I would have gotten something that made it past the end so that the sides could die into it, but I only had 8-foot material, so that's what I used. And I'm just cutting these up, gluing them, and nailing them together with the 2-inch brad nails again. And I take care to notch these around the sides so that they look continuous. And you can see that uneven bamboo top that it's going to cover, and it really just looks much better with this little cap. And I fill that in, and I stain it up with the same special walnut stain. At this point, I'm desperately rushing to get the job done before I head over to the event, so I'm using everything in my possession to just get these up there and get it moving. Now that those are on, I just sand everything down with the Festool. And again, I'm just hitting it with 150, get the high spots down. Another feature of the bar is that it has to hold a banner, and I wanted it to be user-friendly, so I decided to just go with 3/4 inch black pipe and some floor flanges. And I made sure that I used long enough screws that would hit into the 2x4 subframe so that if the wind caught the banner, it wouldn't just rip these things right out of the pine top. And this will make it easy for the bar owners to just take these down and throw a new banner up. You know, if they want to change it or not use the banner, they can just pull these out and leave the flanges on the tabletop. So I screw those in, just make sure it's all going to work. And now I take the bar edge off and stain it up real quick. And like I said, it's the same special walnut stain, and I'm not doing any sort of pre-treat, just laying it on there. And it comes out surprisingly even. I've heard horror stories about people staining pine and having it be completely blotchy and only grabbing in half the material and totally looking terrible. To be honest, that's never happened to me, and I've stained a lot of pine. So you can get an idea of what it looks like, and then the disassembly is pretty quick. So the bamboo rolls up, comes right off with just a couple of screws, and you'll see all of a sudden a crossbar is going to appear right about now. There it is. And I had to put that in because the whole table was sort of rocking back and forth. And that's just a piece of 3/4 by 3/4 angle, and I just drilled and tapped it into the legs. And having that one angle piece in there made a huge difference in terms of the stability of the whole table. So I label that crossbar so I know what's the front, and then I head over to the venue. And as I said before, I'm putting this in the sand, so what I do once I start to get this thing together is I throw 4 plywood blocks down underneath the feet, and that'll just keep it from sort of sinking throughout the evening while they're, you know, trying to serve drinks off of it. There's going to be a pretty good amount of weight on the bar, so I don't want it to just get lower and lower as the night goes on. And I'm just screwing everything together. Again, with all that 1/4-20 hardware, I basically just showed up there with a little plastic bin full of 1/4-20 nuts, and everything goes together. Put the top on there, and now it's just a matter of putting on the bamboo. And the 2 guys that I'm working with are the bar owners, so I'm sort of talking them through it as I'm putting it together so that they know that once I'm gone, they can take this thing apart and keep using it. And the charity that I did this for is called Girls Rising. I'll put a link to the charity in the description, and it's definitely worth checking out. They do a lot of great work, and I encourage you to look into them and see what they're into, and maybe you can help support them. So hanging up the banner, we just used zip ties and basically wrapped it around the post to keep everything nice and tight. And again, the charity is called Girls Rising. The bar that I built this for is called Still Partners, and the event is called Beach Fest. All in all, this was a good little build. I didn't have a lot of time to do it, so it was a little rushed, but it's a nice finished product, and the event went great, and the bar survived, and they've actually used it for a few events since then. This is a good example of how you can make something that flat packs with, you know, inexpensive material like steel and the bandsawed pine, and make it into something that you can use over and over again. You know, take it apart, put it back together, and it's gonna stand the test of time. I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from this video. Please like and subscribe, and follow us on Instagram at Make Everything Shop. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.